Hi, this is Aaron22, and this is going to be our second DWR specifics video. This one will deal with spells as it relates to the Dragon Warrior Randomizer. So, if you've played the original Dragon Warrior game, you generally know what the spells do, but things have changed a little bit into the Randomizer, so we're going to go into some detail, although we might end up coming back and doing a little bit more specific with one or two things. Anyway, this is the Randomizer flag sets, and there are two flags that specifically deal with spells. One of them is random spell learning, which if this is on, which this is normally on both in the training tournament and or it's always on the training tournament and in standard. This randomizes spell learning, and all spells will be learned by level 16. It's if you've ever played the game before and noticed a bunch of spells dropping at 16, that's why. Level 16, you get everything, because that's the expected. Generally, you don't want the game to drag out too much longer than that, although it still does sometimes. 16 is like the average go level, but it isn't always, there. And the other flag, if you don't do this, then you get heal more at 17, hurt more at 19. It's a little less fun, I think. The other flag specifically is no hurt more, which if you have this checked, you cannot learn hurt more, which is... this is just a challenge flag. I mean, maybe because early hurt more can make a seed a lot easier. In fact, pretty much anytime you get hurt more, even late in the game, you have some use for it. Sometimes you don't, but yeah. Anyway, moving along, we're going to go into spells. I set up the format a little bit better this time, so I'll just type along as we go into each one. So the first thing, the heal spell, costs 3 MP, and it heals 17 to 25 hit points. The notable thing here is that the heal range is less than herbs, which is 23 to 30. So when in battle, herbs are safer than the heal spell. Also worth noting, I've seen people do this sometimes, while you're fighting the Dragon Lord, people will want to not cast... we'll try to cast heal, like if they have some extra MP versus the heal mores. I think this is generally a bad idea because the hurt more range on the Dragon Lord is still 20 to 30. So you're doing 17 to 25 to make up 20 to 30, and that's generally a losing battle. Herbs are a little bit safer. It still doesn't always work out, but just want to get that out of the way. Heal more. Heals 85 to 100 hit points. It does cost 8 MP, so it is a little bit more costly. And when you think about that, heal more is more efficient than heal when you need to heal 50 HP or more. Because generally speaking, it's faster. Casting heal is like an extra 4 seconds when you do that, and racing is a big deal. Even little things like that, when you keep doing them, are going to matter. The other thing is that you have a tendency to not want to cast a third heal spell, so you tend to heal less, and that can sometimes catch you. So if you have very low if you have very low MP, you're probably still going to want to cast heal, but it is something to keep in mind. Once you've fully cleared the maximum 2 heal range, you probably want to just cast heal more instead. So the next couple of spells, hurt does 9 to 16 damage, and it can be blocked. Hurt more is the same way, 58 to 65 damage, and it can also be blocked. Something to keep in mind, hurt is an extraordinarily good early game spell because very few enemies at the beginning of the game have any hurt resistance. You can take out things like Rogue Scorpions with 3 hurt spells. Droll Magi sometimes takes a little bit more than that. A lot of the mid-game enemies can be killed with 3 to 4 hurt spells. So if you have very low AP, hurt, and maybe heal more, you can take on most of the mid-game. And we might do a video specifically about mid-game enemies at some point. But enemies that have hurt resist. This is a very important list. The 15 out of 16 hurt resist enemies are Metal Slime, Demon Knight, Wizard, Golem, Red Dragon, and Dragon Lord phases 1 and 2. These are not enemies that you want to use Hurt More on, except in some sort of desperation situation. because it's probably going to fail. So it's just something to keep in mind. I believe, yeah. So that's hurt or hurt more, by the way. You're probably not using hurt against most of these enemies anyway, but hurt more 100% will not work. So enemies with 7 out of 16 resist are Stone Man and Blue Dragon. These are enemies that you might consider using this against every once in a while. There is some practical purpose, especially if they're on a spike tile, like in Hawksness, or possibly guarding the princess, and you want to be able to get through that in one go with no attack power and possibly no heals. That can be pretty useful. Enemy with 3 resists, 3 out of 16 resist. There's 1 Wraith Knight. 2 out of 16 or 1/8 resist is Green Dragon. Green Dragon Lord, that's funny. And 1/16 is Star Wyvern, Axe Knight, and Armored Knight. So generally speaking, you're not going to want to cast, Hurt More at any of these. There's a reason to do this. The rest of them, it's more of an annoyance that it pops up, but it's not really a deterrent. Like, using Hurt Mores on an Axe Knight is still basically the best grind in the game. Which I'm not going to really get into right now. But, yeah, pretty much anything after that you can kill with a Hurt More. Most of the mid-game enemies can be zapped with a Hurt More, which makes having Hurt More, in the middle of the game really useful, because you can in one-shot kill most things in the game. So let's see, Radiant, this one's actually going to be more complicated than you might think. What it does is it lights up the dark areas. However, it does it in a curious way. So it lights up a 7x7 group around you, so 7 tiles away for 80 steps. Then it will be 5x5 for 60 steps. Then 3x3, or the same as a torch, for 60 steps. Then it goes out. So, if you don't have torches, Radiant is great to use. If you are newer to the game, Radiant will be a lot more useful, as you're not as familiar with the caves. However, I would say you should try to not rely on Radiant. Radiant actually gains more use in some other flag sets, where it's harder to know exactly where you are the moment you step into a cave, even with regular torchlight. So, outside spell. It exits out of dark areas and Basement of Sharlock. This is something that there's a difference between outside and return. Outside will take you out the way you came in, with one exception, as long as it's a dark area, an area where you'd have to use a torch or cast Radiant to be able to see where you're going, or just have it memorized, I suppose. The one exception here, though, is the Swamp Warp, where if you are in South, if you go inside of South Swamp and cast outside, it will take you out the north side. That is something that is a relic from the original game. There is, if you do have the Stair Shuffle flag on, this won't operate this way for, very specific reasons that always take you out the entrance you walked in. But that's not something that's in the flag sets we're going to be using, so I won't worry about it too much. Return spell, warp back to Tantagel. It'll teleport you, normally below Tantagel, but if below is not possible, then it's up. And if both are not possible, then it's the left side. And if, somehow all the 3 are blocked, it'll teleport you to the right side. This is only usable in Overworld and light areas, except Basement of Sharlock. Basement of Sharlock is an exception because it's lit up, but by the other rules of the game, it shouldn't be. I like to say it's because the ball of light is down there. The Dragon Lord's guarding it, and you can't snuff out the ball of light. So that's my own excuse. I don't know if that's even in the game or anything. So next spell, Repel, blocks encounters from enemies that are defense broken. The important thing here is defining what that defense broken means. Oops, what did I do? Defense broken means the hero's defense power is equal or greater to the enemy's attack power, with one small difference. If an enemy has an odd number of attack, you need 1 more defense power than that. due to rounding, because your defense power when it is applied is actually it's cut in half, and as a result of that, the game always rounds down. It does not keep decimals. It does not keep fractions. So if there's any remainder, it's just chopped off. Repel is very useful at the end of the game when you just don't want to fight all the slimes and stuff. If you have a bunch of desert around Tantagel, you might want to use it too a few levels in, just to keep from having to get bogged down in basic enemy fights. Stop spell blocks enemy spells, not breath attacks. And block rates for enemies are somewhat randomized per seed. This one's a little bit more complicated to go into, but the general rule is that the higher the enemy level, the greater range it has. So earlier, easier enemies have lower potential cap. Sharlock enemies can have 7 out of 16 or 9 out of 16 as their cap, or could be 0 out of 16. Have to test it each seed. So once it's determined for the seed, it's always going to be the same way. You don't have to worry about, one red dragon having 9 out of 16 and the next one having 0. Whatever it is, it's set that way. So it's generally discoverable. Now, you'd have to cast it like hundreds of times to get a reliable result, but you can get a pretty good feel. Like, if you cast Stop Spell 3 times and it fails, it's probably high. You could just be getting really bad luck, but I don't like to assume I'm getting bad luck. I like to assume things are actually difficult. If you assume everything is bad luck, then you might wind up, jumping off the cliff over and over, hoping to land on the soft spot. So the last spell, and I did order these for a specific reason, but I ended up not doing that for that reason. So we're just going to kind of do a little bit here on sleep, which is it puts enemies to sleep. Can be blocked. Also, a slept enemy cannot block a run attempt and cannot dodge. The last part people don't usually notice, but because the highest dodge enemies, you don't sleep a lot. But yeah, once an enemy is put to sleep, it cannot dodge. It will always, any hit you do, or any swing you do will always land. So I think the only enemy you might see that sort of difference come up on would be a werewolf, who has a decent amount of sleep resistance, so people don't casually use it on them anyway. So there's a whole lot to say about this, but sleep is probably the deepest spell in the game. May make an entire video about it, as there's a bunch of numbers you can crunch on it. The sleep resistance per enemies is very good to know, because sleep is something that can be a complete godsend in some seeds, or you may never use it, depending on when it comes, what kind of stats you have, and so on. There's also another thing to consider is, when is it better to use sleep instead of immediately trying to run? When is the success rate to get away from an enemy higher by using sleep than not? And these are all things that will take a considerable amount of time to go on, and I'm going to try to keep these videos short. So thank you again, and hopefully this helps you with your Dragon Warrior Randomizer plays.